welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Oh, good morning. My name's Scott Rahn. I'm author of The Book of It, which you can see in larger than life over my shoulder, the cover of. It's available, as it says down there, from Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can also get it about every digital format there is. And actually, your local bookstore can order it through Ingram Distributing. The Book of It is honestly the end composition from years, decades actually, of research into something that just ran across in study and stories that seems to pass through all of history, even into the world of legend. It's part history, part philosophy. May well be part fiction, and don't know. But it is what it is. In order to start into, I guess I'm going to read something from the foreword of my book. It says, my own attempts at putting it at last into words are dedicated to the dogs of the past, present, and future, all of them. For if it were not for the will of these noble creatures to endure often great sacrifice and personal destructions in the name of their own loyalty to what each of them knows of it, not to mention each one's own devoted love for it, then it would have been deemed to, turning page, have been buried very long ago, so that by today it would be thought of as just another old legend. Although they have done this great thing, and there doubtless always shall be them doing it, the words of it are not even the words of these faithful guardians. The dogs are always only those who have come to discover or rediscover bits of it and carry them forward. As for those of us who have come to become involved in it, so much and so many have come and gone since we began our game that long ago we mostly lost our belief in such things as nations, empires, social and cultural images and norms, racial differences and religions, and their dictates and dogmas. It's gods fighting gods, dragons at war with all of them, divine truth versus the lie, saints versus devils, heroes versus all-powerful adversaries, noble knights versus others named as unholy infidels, the civilized versus the savages, good versus evil, light versus darkness, even the one called God versus Satan. It has been said, taught, and preached for centuries that all of these are the same thing, but this is just not so. Odd, but in spite of all we have allowed to come to be, only to see its own destruction at the hands of populations who don't know better, the only ones that we truly see as evil are those among us who perpetuate lies and destruction for their own gain. To someone out there among you, it is a strangely frightening thing, this being told the tale of the great journey to the trophy that I speak of. That's, like I said in the foreword. Oh, Chelsea, my favorite character in the book. That's kind of hard to picture. I mean, the first chapter's kind of a metaphorical autobiography. I kind of like myself. But I still have to say, in the chapter titled The Keeper of the Sword, or Carrier of the Sword, sorry, the old heretic in the cave that tells the story, I just like him. He's not afraid to speak of what he thinks he knows, and he's not afraid of ridicule or anything else as he tells his story. I think that's the way anybody should be. And I rather hope that answers your question. There's not a huge amount of actual physical characters. I mean, a lot of them are inferred. Many of them, quite easily, being the narrator, could be me. It's a metaphorical journey more than a fictional journey, I can assure you of that. It came, like I said, through decades of research and discovering that there's basically two philosophies and schools of thought that have always been there. One works for the betterment of the future for everyone, and the other is more about self-aggrandizement, that the old what separates the men from the boys is the price of their toys type thing. It's not about the more you have personally. I mean, our lives, all of them are finite. And there's an old saying, the dead have no pockets. Now, you don't get to take any of it unless you build a big, expensive crypt, I suppose. But the things a single person can begin in their life that can carry on for centuries. Most startling example, chance meeting with a wandering young person and an old priest on a road supposedly 3,000 years ago. Well, that young person was the one known as Abraham in the Bible. He ended up the father of the three largest Western religions. Yes, there is kind of. There's the book itself, the whole book is, well, to challenge beliefs and make the reader's mind start to think of possibilities, things that they may never have known existed, chances they never may have seen as possible. The entire book, like I said, is full of metaphors, etc. Part of it being a key to reading other ancient writings. Sorry, things that may not need to be taken literally that are, and things that are misrepresented perhaps because, well, vocabularies were different. Excuse me. I mean, even in the age of the cowboy in America, which is 125 years ago, 130 years ago, the average cowboy only had a vocabulary of 250 words. There's average third grader probably has many times that in today's world because we just have so much more to describe. and so much more that's out there. And translations, and the idea that traveling storytellers tend to embellish, always have, make sometimes different customs, different thoughts, but there are also different things show through. It's about 500. How do I begin each story of every after? Lex, I'm not sure I quite understand. Each story stands on its own. It's a short story. If you read each chapter, I mean, you can read a chapter, put it down, come back 3 months later and read the next chapter. It's a short story, but they're all interconnected in theme and with each other, actually, still. Their whole thing. Oh, okay, Lex. They begin different ways. I mean, okay, the introduction. The clock that must recognize remnant of an ancient and sacred number system that dates back to at least the very beginning of our present civilization. The ancient number system is the base 60 number system. It's all but dead in today's world. The machinists still use it. Cartographers, map makers still use it. Timekeepers still use it. Other than that, basically everything's base 10. But it's 12 by 30, which is weird because, well, Giza's located at 30 degrees and 30 degrees, longitude and latitude, where they cross, basically. There's things that seem to be important, numbers that seem to be important, like 30. Another chapter, well, I mentioned the carrier of the sword. It's just the young person that encounters him talking about his life at that time, how he's wandering aimlessly. They begin as different stories because that's what they are. I really don't have a more concise way to say that. I'm sorry. One's of a scientific mind. One is somebody describing it as kind of a board game. It's just, each one is different. And hopefully that kind of answers your question. I can tell you each one, well, by the ones that have read and responded, are interesting and thought-provoking. The title of the book, Chris, the book of it is, well, basically the book of my journey, but it itself is this thing, philosophy, etc., that goes back. I call it a single thread in the tapestry of history. It was always impossible to define where it began, with who it began, why it's basically universal. It seems to exist everywhere. And, well, as I keep saying, calling it became kind of its nickname. Well, there it is again. There it is in the story from India. And still being unable to name it, it just became its formal name. So the book is titled The Book of It. Hopefully that helps you out, Chris. But like I said, it is not divinable. It is not God, that's certain. It is not something that somebody originated, be it like the teachings of, say, Zoroaster, Confucius, Buddha, any of them. Although it's reflected in their teachings, it existed apparently before them. It's may even go back to when we were primitive tribals. I don't know. That's part of what passing this on is about. It's time for other people to go looking. Although I'm pretty positive, for several reasons, that there was probably at least two civilizations and or empires that predate our history. I just can't really prove it. Nobody can. Anything before about this side of 600 BC is all legend, even ancient Egypt. There was no timekeepers to the Akkadians in Greece. Chris, I hope that kind of explains what you want to know. And but it is something, my own curiosity, I've become almost obsessed until I get bored with it. But there's so many directions it can go that I've never grown bored with it. I may walk away from it and do something else for a while because that captures my attention. But as soon as I'm done with that, then I'm back to researching things from, I guess, it. And there are even things I've learned since this book was written and published that aren't in the book. Something I liked about the book is about some of the characters, they're observers more than participants, but none of the characters believe humanity is doomed. It's up to humanity and what humanity does, and humanity could be doomed, but they all hold hope. I tell people now, sometimes hope's all you have. It's the best thing there is. You can't force the change of a person's heart or a person's way of life. I mean, in my lifetime, one of the things when we were young, my generation fought for, we got rid of, say, Jim Crow law. We got rid of the segregation, forced segregation, all of that, thinking we accomplished a great deal, which we did. I'm not putting that down, but we changed. Obviously, in the last few years, it's been proven that people's hearts weren't changed. The racists are still racist. Whatever was believed, or law, or the evolution that came for the good, there's still the other ones. You can't change hearts. You can't change hearts with words. Only people can change their own hearts. And that's kind of what is kind of the subtext of it. Is part of free will is you have to be open to change. You see things, you learn things, you have to change and adapt to them. And understand that if you've learned something that's true, you're stuck with it. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's going to eat away at you from the inside until you embrace it and hold on to it. That's just the way it is. You can profess to believe in every lie that's out there if you want. It doesn't matter. But the truth is the truth. And then the truth is sometimes not pretty to look at. Just as history isn't pretty to look at sometimes. But knowing it and embracing it in both cases is how you get to heal and move on. Changes everything, Grant. That's one of the reasons I'm against the tech people that are in favor of enhancements, because enhancement, or even immortality, both will bring just dormancy. There will be no imagination, no curiosity, no desire for something new and different that comes with the change of generations, or curiosity leading somebody to discover things like I discovered. But without change, we still wouldn't have indoor plumbing, electricity, stereo music, radio broadcasts. Even though those are only material changes, you can also see how little or how much, depending on where you look, people have changed over the last 4,000 years. We still have the same desires and wants, but there are pockets now of people that are working together towards them. And there are, of course, pockets of people trying to force other people to move in the direction they think moves towards them. But it's all change. Whether it ends up being for good or bad, well, that's another story also. What starts out maybe as a great idea. Favorite thing about my book? I just like children. It's kind of hard to say you have a favorite thing. My favorite thing about the book isn't actually in the text. It's in the fact that friends of mine that have read, one or two are known to say, as you put it in the book of it, or, they've come to let themselves be affected by what they've read. I mean, in many cultures, Zoroastrian and the American native, words, spoken or written, are the harbingers of creation. The thought, word, action, and deed are what bring about change. And I would have to say that's my favorite thing about the book. It's not the characters. It's more what they say, and it's more subjective or not, what you come to see as different from what you believed before that's worth checking out. So hopefully that will answer your question. It's the only thing I have against doing this with the virtual, because it's hard for me to know how you felt about the answer to my question. What brings about change? Persistence, passage of time, sometimes just random events. I mean, whatever it was that Constantine in Rome brought him to fight in the name of Christianity, which ended up changing and laying the foundations for what would eventually become the Catholic Church and the other Christian religions after that time. It's just, it's hard to say what brings about change exactly in the case of each change. Some things somebody just thinks of. Somebody, woven cloth would be a great example. I don't know how many centuries this would have taken, but somebody come up with turning a fiber into string, which made the book unique or different. It's saying things other people are not. Quite bluntly, that's what makes it different. It's a person who's not afraid to be called names or given titles that are probably untrue, even though I'd say in the beginning that, this is not what I am. I'm not some great liberator. I'm not somebody that's out to take over the world. I'm not somebody that wants to form a religion. I don't even want to form a following. I want people to go out and look for themselves. Find out for themselves things. Don't just sit there and stare at the 100th rerun of a TV show on or adopt your life around watching sporting events. That was a distraction that worked clear back in ancient Rome. I'm not saying I don't like sports. I love to sit down and watch a game. I've been a Cub fan since I was a child. It's not that at all. It's just what you spend your time doing. I watch especially younger people. They spend their time watching memes on their iPhone and everything else. It seems like a total waste of time to me, and probably a lot of people my age, And then I think back, well, okay, you get an age or a generation or two beyond me, they thought the same thing about us watching television. It's not, but what makes the book unique or different is back to the beginning, what I said. It's designed to make people consider things. It's designed to make people think. It's designed to open minds to possibilities. It's not some preaching text. It's not a a story, be it science fiction or a legend, a sword and fantasy thing, some historical thing. It's stories. And, well, text in some cases. When you get into the scientific one, he quotes a whole lot of things and lays out a whole lot of information. Or I suppose you'd call it different. I've watched a lot of apocalyptic films, and I was like, well, no, that's not how it would be. And there's a chapter that deals with, this is how it would be, folks, for the first 4 or 5 years. Let's be honest, this is not something, because I know somebody that thought he wanted to see the end of the world because he didn't like the world. It's like, no, you don't. And hopefully, TJ, that answers your question. And sorry if I get a bit preachy or like a lecturer, but that's kind of the way I speak sometimes. And, but like I said, using speech from characters makes it easier on the reader to accept. Okay, if I stood on a soapbox in the middle of the farmer's market and started telling you had to change because the end is near, well, no. Every chapter has more than one lesson, Michael. It's a matter of seeing the lesson in some cases. It's a matter of paying attention to what you're reading in some cases. And in some cases, I've said in the book, in both the beginning and the ending, read the book, put it down, come back a few months later, pick it up, read it again, because a lot of what was said the first time you read it will have had time to settle in your mind, and there will be a lot of things a second reading will actually reveal. And if you do that a few times, you'd be surprised how much the text of the book has changed in your mind as you read it. And, and that's even if you don't do any research. But if you do, well, that changes things a lot faster. But yeah, there are lessons. There are even critiques of lessons that have been taught again and again for century after century that are out there in the public domain that we totally ignore. We just, that's just an old story. Or why would anybody, ever do that? Or that's just the way it is. Seems the big one. That one, and I'm kind of busy, leave me alone. But yeah, it's full of lessons, Michael. Well, thanks, Alex. I hope you continue to enjoy. I'm assuming by great piece you're talking about my interview, not the book itself. I hope you think the same thing of the book. You'll go out and pick it up and read it and see what I'm talking about. I do have to say, however, listening to myself talk, because I've said these things so many times for so many decades that sometimes I feel like I'm talking in circles even now, even though I know most all of you have never heard any of this before. And again, thank you, Alex. But sorry, I've been out in some pretty inclement weather. Let's get a copy of my book. Everything's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, if you have a Barnes and Noble store. Every ebook source. I tell everybody when I say that. Personally, I'm in favor of paper copies because I can make notes in the margin and write on the cover plates. Some of those books you see behind me, the inside cover plate is just covered with notes and notations, lists of what gods came in what order and what time period they were worshipped, different changes in what we know as ancient Egypt between the early, middle, and later kingdoms. Okay, thank you, Alyssa. And this pretty much has been a really fast half hour. I've got just a few minutes left, and I thank all of you who asked questions and all of you been here and just listened. And I would like to remind everybody, well, first off, we changed the clocks tonight. That's important. Set your clock back so you don't miss me if you want to try. But 1:30 Eastern time tomorrow, I will be back here. And I did leave out with my book. You can get it from Ingram Distributing, through Ingram Distributing, from virtually every bookstore in the world. It's available everywhere. If you say that to your bookstore clerk and they feel like they're looking it up, that's one place where I made out good. We had a local bookstore with a lady working there that would look for everything. And I'm guessing we're getting close to time to wrap up here. And once again, I'd like to thank everybody. And once again, I'd like to remind everybody that I'm going to be back tomorrow at 1:30 Eastern time to do this again. And I hope I hear from still more of you. And it is time for me now to say goodbye. Until tomorrow or later, who knows? We maybe even pass each other in the street. I like to travel. But don't come up to somebody that looks like me because you may be wrong. There's a lot of people seem to look at me. Bye for now.